Okay, hello everybody. I'm Julia Johnson. I'm hoping everybody's loaded up and ready to go. As I say, I'm Julia Johnson. Hello everybody, I'm not sure that first part worked. I'm Julia Johnson from the Business Resilience team at Instinctive Partners. We're a business communications consultancy and my team specialises in making business resilience instinctive. Our unique approach combines communication, culture and process, and our end-to-end approach encompasses business continuity as well as risk management, issues management, crisis preparedness, management and communication, and product recall. We work in partnership with clients ranging from global corporations to SMEs, trade associations to governments, equipping teams with tools to perform at their best. Now today, I'm focusing on engaging employees in business continuity specifically. Slight problem in making my slides move forward. Just one moment. Let me try again. Yeah. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened there. Right, what we're going to cover in the presentation is why employee engagement is important to business continuity, how you can engage employees in business continuity, and what the challenges are, and there will be challenges, and then of course how to address those challenges. I've got two case study examples of recent projects that we've worked on, and it's probably worth saying at this point that we as a business tend to work with manufacturing businesses, so this presentation is written from that perspective, but it's equally applicable to service companies, office-based industries, in all sectors. A lot of the work that Instinctive Partners undertakes is with the food and drink industry, but this approach is applicable across all sorts of industries. So let's start off with looking at why employee engagement is important to business continuity. Well, the simple answer is that great business revolves around people, and if the people doing the business haven't bought into it, then there will be a lack of enthusiasm, a lack of commitment, and ultimately a less great business. And the same, of course, is absolutely true of business continuity. Thinking more specifically then, business continuity is more than an IT issue, although some businesses that we work with would like to make it the IT department's problem, but it is much more holistic than that, as I'm sure most people are very well aware. And because it's a holistic discipline, it's important not to work in silos and to break those silos down, be they geographical or cultural or functional. It's about breaking down those cultures and getting people from different parts of a business talking to each other, and engaged employees can do that. Slight hitch again. Okay. A commitment to the a business continuity planning process is much more likely if employees are engaged, and that's both initially as you're getting the planning underway and on an ongoing basis. So keeping the plans fresh, rehearsing them, making sure they're valid, and so on. And you simply cannot undertake business continuity without engaged employees. Employees are the ones who have the realistic understanding of what is needed to create a business continuity plan and the skills and knowledge to implement and enact that plan if it comes to that. So it's absolutely crucial. There's an old Chinese proverb that says, "Tell me and I'll forget. Show me and I may remember. involve me and I'll understand. And if you take one thing away from my presentation today, it's the importance of involving employees in the business continuity process throughout. That way, they will have invested in the plan and be much more likely to want it to succeed. Business continuity needs to be owned by the business. And when beginning a new client project, we as Instinctive partners always recommend the creation of a task force to ensure that the BC planning activity is influenced internally and advocated by people on the ground. We, of course, then provide development and guidance for this team to ensure that they contribute positively. The task force then guides the business through the following process, and of course, depending on the maturity in business continuity terms, a company would spend more or less time on each of the following stages, but it's really important to have engagement at every stage. So typically, we'd start off, or any project would start, with a discovery phase. This is often a combination of desk research, but also importantly, one-to-one interviews with selected colleagues from the business to establish kind of where we're going, what's the context for the BC project. We need to understand at this point what relevant resources already exist, who knows about them, how they are currently perceived, and how, if at all, that they're used. It's also important at this point to undertake critical incident reviews of previous events that have happened. This is a vital element in the understanding of what works and what doesn't in terms of BC workarounds. We also have an online benchmarking tool called Crisis Optic, which we designed to measure crisis management rather than focusing specifically on business continuity. But it does cover a little bit of business continuity, and it also covers employee engagement. And it's a really useful tool and benchmark to undertake during the discovery phase of any project. And if anybody's interested, I can give you the link to Crisis Optic. It's a free tool, and you can find out more from me. But that's something that we will often work with clients to run at this discovery phase. So this approach means that voices are heard and opinions contribute to the process from the beginning. And it's also a cathartic experience. We've had a project recently that kicked off where we had people in a sort of a workshop environment doing this sort of sharing of information. And they were saying things like, it's such a relief that we're now talking about this. I've been worrying about what we do if X happens, and it's great that we're now tackling that. So it's surprising, actually, how just sort of on a human level, getting people to talk about it can really start to involve them from the beginning, and they're automatically then engaged. The next phase in a BC planning program would typically be a business impact analysis workshop or series of workshops. And this phase involves prioritising activities, agreeing thresholds for loss intolerance, and typically would involve a broad spectrum of colleagues. And from an engagement point of view, this is absolutely great. We want cross-functional involvement at this point. We want people who really are on the ground making it happen, identifying the priority activities, because they're the ones that know. They're the ones that know how long they could live without that priority activity. And they are really then, as a byproduct, buying into the process. Then, of course, you move on to the development of business continuity workarounds. And naturally, this encompasses people from across the business, which is also a great thing to encourage engagement. Because as well as actually developing the workarounds, it's naturally providing awareness and engagement in the planning. And it's really important that it's the people that are on the ground, as it were, who develop the workarounds, because it means that they will be better placed to enact them if and when they're required. They will know what they're expected to do, and they will know how to do it. So it just makes complete sense that they're involved from the start. Any process will probably identify some gaps that need to be filled. These could be all sorts of things. They could be CapEx requirements that come to light because something is found to be a real problem from a BC point of view. It might be that your business is currently relying on a single supplier for something, so you might be needing to find alternative suppliers. It might be that certain decisions, for example, at a site level business continuity plan, certain decisions need to be made by somebody higher up in the business at kind of group level. And all those things tend to come to light at this point. So it's important to plug those gaps and find solutions. And again, a cross-functional team is putting the workarounds into action. So they want to solve these problems. They want to fill these gaps. They will know why they are doing it, what the urgency is, who to talk to externally and who to escalate to internally. And it's important that all that is laid out at this point. So it's all very well having a super duper business continuity plan, but it's got to actually go live and people need to know about it. So it needs embedding. This is about launching it and making it live through an ongoing campaign, we would argue. And this is absolutely key. And this is really about employee engagement at this stage. It's important to make sure that everyone who needs to know where the plan is kept knows where to find it, and whether that's on a shelf, whether it's on as part of a standard operating procedure. Don't just have it on your sort of local server, because what happens if you've lost the IT and so forth. It's important that people are reassured and know where to find the plan. And I think reassurance is the key to this, because it's helping those people who will be enacting business continuity to think, great, we've got a plan, I know what my role is and I know how to undertake it, so I can sleep at night. And people who wouldn't necessarily be directly involved in enacting the plan are also reassured that their business has got it under control. They've thought about worst case scenarios, they've thought about things that can go wrong, and they have it under control. So that is a reassurance message, and that's going to make them feel better about the company and kind of safer in working for the company. We've just got a question here. Somebody has lost some audio. I'm hoping that everybody else can hear. I think on the basis that it was one person, I'll continue. Okay.
Hi, Julia. It's the BCI here. There seems to be no problems with the audio.
Okay, good. Okay, that must have been one person, unfortunately. Okay, the final stage in the cycle before starting all over again, of course, is testing the business continuity plan. And engagement here is critical, because the whole or the wider team who would be involved in enacting the plan need to be involved, and they need to be reassured that the plan will in fact work, and also that they understand what their role is in it and that any queries are answered. So that's a really important part too. So looking in a slightly different way at the importance of engagement in the typical stages, I've kind of listed out into 3 blocks here the typical stages of business continuity planning, and I thought we could look at the impact of good engagement at each stage. So first of all, under the business impact analysis stage, it's really important, even before this whole project starts, to explain the context, to really put it into the context of good sort of license to operate, due diligence, good governance and so forth, setting out where the company is at the moment, and that might be that there's a BC plan on the shelf but it hasn't really been looked at for a while, or that one person wrote it and it hasn't been shared with the business and perhaps it's not quite as realistic as it might be, or perhaps there isn't even a plan at all. So set out where you are now and then explain where you want to go to, and critically what the benefits will be for your audience. You really need to answer the what's in it for me question, and you need to do it early, because there's going to be a lot of work involved, there's going to be a lot of time involved, and you really need people to buy into the project. You need the buy-in of the wider team to make sure that whatever is produced in the plan is comprehensive and it's an honest appraisal, for example, of the high priority activities. You don't want functions fighting. You don't want people saying, you know, my activity is more important than your activity. You really need to think kind of at a higher level than that. So that's really important to get the buy-in from everybody and need everybody working on this together. And it's important to focus on the ultimate objective, which is a good, effective business continuity plan. The objective isn't to fill in lots of spreadsheets and lots of forms and kind of have some fun doing that. It's actually, and I'm sort of joking about that, but that it sometimes can seem like that with business continuity planning, but you really need to think about the ultimate objective and get people focused on that. And that, again, that's coming back to the reassurance message. Now, when you come to developing the workarounds for key activities, team working is crucial to identify the BC workarounds. And because the people that are on the ground are going to be the ones that know what's going to work best. It's also important at this point to have a culture, or at least facilitate a culture or an atmosphere where people are happy to challenge colleagues over what is and isn't feasible. There's no point in being unrealistically ambitious or over-optimistic, or indeed overly pessimistic. You need realism, and it's better to do that with a group of people, because everybody's naturally going to sit somewhere on the optimism-pessimism spectrum. And you need sort of counter arguments to end up somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. And then when you come to the embedding phase, the communicating it, embedding it, and then testing it, obviously the business continuity plan doesn't end up with the action checklist neatly typed up. Everybody needs to know that it's there, how they put it into practice, and when to put it into practice. And really, you want to be planning this embedding phase before the project even begins, which can seem kind of like very long-term thinking, but that's the best way to make it live if you can start thinking about it from the beginning. We talked a bit about testing the plan, and that could be either as a desktop exercise, or in some cases in a business you probably want to actually test some things physically. So if you're relying on Wi-Fi for something, for example, you might want to turn it off as a test and just see how the backup works. But if you're doing a desktop exercise, you'll need to involve the wider team and involve them in the review of that exercise so that they know what works and what doesn't and what lessons are learned. And again, that's going to engage them in the process. And you should review the plan coming out of that and indeed coming out of any actual uses of it on a regular basis. And obviously that will need to involve the wider team as well. So that's kind of looking at it from a different perspective. There are some other specific engagement techniques that you might want to cover, as well as involvement. We've talked a lot about involvement, but there are some other things to think about. So in the kind of the before you're starting the program, really important to get the senior leadership team involved, and for people to know that they are advocating this project. You know, the message needs to come from the top, because then it shows the importance that the board or the exec committee are placing on this, and people are more likely to follow, you know, to actually sort of get involved with it. Sorry. We talked about the what's in it for you messaging. That's really key, really crucial to think about the benefits to the individuals, because otherwise, why should they bother? And possibly think about making it part of an employee's objectives. So that's a little bit more stick rather than carrot, but really think, that might be, if it's really critical, that might be something that you want to think about. While you're in the sort of midst of putting together your business continuity plan, you might want to start workshops with a Chatham House rules section. That's really, I'm not sure everybody's familiar with that phrase, but it just means that everything's confidential. Whatever people would say for the next 20 minutes, say, is confidential. It won't be documented. We won't record it. It's just a chance for people to air their opinions, get things off their chests, share their concerns, and so on. And actually, that can be quite helpful. And even if there's whinging and there's people complaining about the fact that they've got to do this, it's better to know about it, and then you can address it, or address it with individuals, rather than hoping it's not existing but not really knowing and just sort of letting it go under the radar. Walkarounds are simply visiting and learning from colleagues at other sites, simply walking around and talking. And, just if it's a manufacturing site, visiting a sister manufacturing site and finding out what they've done, to a particular production line if something goes wrong, or how they have managed sort of put together their business continuity workarounds. And it's remarkably simple, but actually rarely happens, and really something worth thinking about. And kind of the after, this is about keeping it live, keeping it fresh in everybody's minds. This is the embedding phase that, as I said, you should really be thinking about before you even embark on the project. Some things to consider and to keep people enthusiastic. Have some refresher sessions on the BC plan, and that's really to sort of refresh people's understanding of it rather than refreshing the plan as such, although obviously you'd need to do that as well. And that they could be run face-to-face, they could be e-learning, as I've said there. You need to make sure that new joiners to the business are also briefed as part of their induction, even if they're not specifically required to undertake business continuity actions. They really need to know it's there for that reassurance message again. Conversation cards and prompts are sort of similar thing, really. These are for managers to start up conversations about business continuity with their colleagues, with their employees, in team meeting scenarios, or other forums in which they're talking to colleagues. And this is just the simple sort of little cards with a question. How are you thinking? What do you think about the X, Y, and Z that your role is in business continuity? Have you had any more thoughts about whatever it is that you're trying to think of a workaround for? And it's just about making it live and keeping the conversation going. Gamification is one of these words that's bandied around a bit, and that's all about making training sessions fun, really, making them into games. And when you undertake a simulation exercise, you can do this to a certain extent. A recent example of one that my company has run was actually not on business continuity, but it could still work. We ran one on a sustainability brief, which was a slightly unusual brief. It was to deliver a training session on the company's away day, which was actually, excuse me, I'll just go back. Here we go. Which was actually taking place on a boat in the Mediterranean. So it was a slightly odd brief, so we needed to make it fun, and the way that we tackled it was dividing the attendees into teams, and we gave them a series of inputs about 10 minutes apart, and asked them each time to decide what action they were going to take, and they only had two options. It was action A or action B. and depending on which action they chose, which decision they took, led them down a different route from other teams who perhaps chose a different answer. And at the end of the exercise, each team was asked to present briefly back to the exec committee, who was also on board, and the exec committee chose what they thought was the best solution and the winner, and they also chose who they thought probably did the least good job. And that losing team was invited to walk the plank, which in fact they did. They jumped into the Mediterranean. So perhaps a slightly extreme example, but a good one of gamification. Okay, we've talked about the benefits of engagement in business continuity, and we've talked about how you can do it at each stage, but of course there will be challenges. And so what are some of these challenges? Well, this one is one that comes up time and again. I haven't got time for business continuity planning. I've got my day job to do. Various answers to that, and we'll come to those in a minute. We could never operate if X, Y, or Z happened. So there's no point in a business continuity plan. That's somebody on the overly pessimistic end of the spectrum. We don't need business continuity planning. We're a quality operation. Slight arrogance coming through there. Don't ever say nothing, it couldn't go wrong, because it can happen to anybody. Business continuity planning is somebody else's problem. That's going back to it's an IT thing. And seeing business continuity as a cost to the business, it's just going to cost us a whole load of money. We'll never need it. What's the point? I'm not sure whether anybody's come across those, but we certainly come across those on a fairly regular basis. So what steps can you take to address these challenges? Well, firstly, it's about right back at the beginning, acknowledging the time commitment that this is going to take, and it will take time, and be realistic about the project length. If you're new to business continuity, you've got to think about it as a change management program, and change management is a journey, not an event. So accept that and brief that from the beginning. We've mentioned before that senior leadership commitment is essential, but a task force approach to get the job done is also key too. The senior leadership shouldn't be making this happen. You need the engagement of employees. And as I said before, if business continuity is newly being tackled by the business, it really is a change management program. And people don't like change, so you need to sell the benefits to everyone. Sell the benefits of the whole project. And as I said before, it's the project. It's not that we need you to fill in this spreadsheet type approach. And I think also empathy is a really key thing to think about at this point as well. Really try to see it from other people's point of view and address those concerns. And that leads on to addressing the negative voices to try to convert them into advocates for the programme. So there's a typical bell curve here, which very simply sort of shows that you're likely to have a group of people, the early adopters, who are really enthusiastic about this programme, who are really up for it, want to get involved, are already setting dates for the workshops. That's fantastic, and obviously you want to harness their enthusiasm and use them to make your business continuity plan work as well as possible. You've also got probably the majority group in the middle who are persuadable that this is a good thing to do. They're kind of rather not bother, but actually, yes, they can see the value in it, and yes, they'll go along with it. That's probably a good thing to do. You'll also have some negative voices. The people who really, they can't see. They can't see the value in it. They don't want to spend the time on getting involved with it. And probably they have genuine concerns about how to do it or how well it will work for the business. it might seem counterintuitive, but if you can convert and focus a bit of attention on those negative voices to convert them into advocates, they will become probably your most powerful advocates, because they've really kind of seen the light and they've changed their opinion, and they can be most enthusiastic. So really focus attention on those enthusiastic early adopters and the negative voices. Okay, so what are the benefits of having engaged employees? Well, under pressure, people often return to type. People react differently, but there is some theory around people returning to type, and by that I mean that an analytical person will focus even more on the detail. Somebody who's more of a driver will push even further for action and start listening even less to detail. And it's really important to recognise who you think those people are in your business, and there are all kinds of psychological profiling you can do, but it's worth having a think about that before they're put under pressure to enact a business continuity plan. And if they are enacting it, you need to start just remembering what those types are, and try to give them materials and briefings that are going to work for them. If a business continuity plan needs enacting in a kind of a more longer term, a medium term basis, you need to watch out for boiling frogs. Now, the boiling frog is a fable describing a frog being slowly boiled alive. And the premise is that if a frog is put suddenly into boiling water, it will jump out. But if the frog is put into tepid water, which is then brought to a boil slowly, it will not perceive the danger and it will be cooked to death. So, and the singing canaries that are mentioned there are from the coal mines, where actually as recently as the 1980s, apparently, canaries were taken down into coal mines, and they would collapse if there was too much carbon monoxide in the air, and they would therefore act as an early warning to the gas and mean that the miners could get out. And apparently most of the canaries actually then recovered once they were in. They had more air, more oxygen, but they were used as an early warning system. And thinking about your colleagues, you can probably categorise most people into either a boiling frog or the singing canary category. As well as teaching colleagues to follow the important business continuity process steps, we also need them to be on the lookout for colleagues who are turning into boiling frogs. So get your people that are likely to sing out loud and clear quite early on and say, we're really under pressure here, and look out for colleagues who are just sort of slowly boiling away like the boiling frogs. So. Okay, I've got a couple of quite short case studies to finish off with at this point. These are both anonymous, I'm afraid, but they're clients we've worked with recently from different types of business. The first one is an international food company. They didn't have any existing business continuity plan, but the centre, the group of the company had said, actually, yeah, we need to have business continuity at all our sites. We need each site, and they've got quite a few sites, to develop their own individual site business continuity plans. And they also introduced their own company central business continuity standard, which they required all of their sites to meet. Our concerns when we started working with them were that they really focused on the fact that the site team's reaction. We worked with one site to start with and to kick off the programme, and they'd been basically told that it was a head office requirement to go through this planning process, but we didn't really know how they were going to react. It was going to be a heavy workload for the site on top of their day jobs. And well, the head office had no previous engagement with the site, and neither had we. So it was all a little bit of a journey into the unknown. So what we did was, at the beginning of the project, before we went anywhere near their plans or the site, we questioned the central business continuity team to get a really good in-depth understanding of the company's culture. What was the reaction likely to be of the site? How were they likely to see this playing out? How did things tend to go down within the business? We then took the time to brief the site director individually, well in advance of the initial workshops, to be completely honest about what was going to be involved. So we set out the programme plan, we agreed a realistic timetable with them, and were completely honest about how much work was going to be involved and what that work would look like. When it came to going to the site to start running the business impact analysis workshops, we took one of the central business continuity team with us, so that they could answer any questions satisfactorily, and also they could witness firsthand the challenges that were being faced by the site, and the site in turn, the site team could also see that the central BC team was taking it all seriously, and then there were quite a few questions that ended up being taken away by the site, the central person, so that worked really well. We allowed for flexibility during the initial workshop so that we could help the site team make the BIA work for them. So initially we had the idea that, sort of rather typically we would review site activities by function. But actually, in the end, we looked at it by production zone. We followed the product journey through the factory because that was a much more familiar approach for the site team, and it seemed to work better for them. And it ended up being a very productive workshop. Actually, in terms of attending the workshop, we recognised that probably not everybody needed to be involved for the whole period. So we recognised the time pressure on individuals and arranged the workshop so that only key people for that particular production zone needed to be present. And I think they found that they were grateful for that as well. And then once we'd sort of finished doing the initial part of the programme, we helped the site team to carry on and complete the job by developing a simple aid memoir to remind them as to how to go about it, how to complete the templates, in order that they could then be left to complete the job themselves. And it'll work very smoothly. The other case study is something quite different, really. This focuses on the Covent Garden, so central London offices of an international business. It wasn't a production site, it was an office location. It came out of a project to develop the company's emergency response plans. They'd kind of worked out how to evacuate people, but suddenly realised that actually they needed some business continuity planning if they lost access to their building. And no previous consideration had been given to this issue, but the terrorist action in London kind of forced it, and they realised that actually they did need to look into this. So what we did was really a very straightforward, but a series of workshops with employees to really sort of say, what do you do? What are the must-do priority activities on site? What are the time thresholds in terms of remote working? How does remote working actually work? Do you have the kit? Do you have the connections? Do you have the passwords? Where's the server? All of those sorts of questions. And we involved a really wide range of employees. So we included the office manager, we included the receptionist, we included the fire marshals, we included the first aiders. So it's everybody who needed to be involved was involved. And then once that was all written up, we embedded the we embedded the plan with a series of sessions that involved scenarios and visualizations, and actually there was a huge amount of practical, enthusiastic engagement with people talking about the first aiding and putting tourniquets on and so forth. But it absolutely proved that the employees were engaged. Okay, so coming to the end of the presentation now, a little bit ahead of schedule, but hopefully that will give you a bit longer for lunch. So in summary, I would argue that employee engagement is absolutely essential for an effective business continuity plan. Employees can and should, and in fact must, be involved throughout the business continuity planning process, but there will be challenges. But they need to be addressed and they need to be thought about with some forward planning. And overall, business continuity plans will be more efficiently implemented if the plan has been developed by an engaged team. And this whole thing about involving people from the start and taking time to do that discovery phase might seem initially that actually the project could take even longer than it was going to anyway. But I would say that it will be more effective if you take the time to do that. And in actual fact, it probably won't take any longer, because the number of projects that I've been involved with where that phase hasn't been properly undertaken by a company, and actually it's not been very efficiently run. So taking the time at the start can in fact make it more efficient as well. Okay, well, thank you very much for listening. If anybody's got any questions, I think there's a way that you can email them to me. Sorry, not email them, put them on the chat. Just a moment. Okay, so somebody has sent a question asking about recommendations for embedding business continuity management systems. I would say that there's a range. It depends on the company. Sometimes it's a combination of face-to-face briefings or e-learning modules. Sometimes it might be actual sort of physical scenarios and sort of testing the projects. You need to think about all the different communication channels that a company has internally as well. And that could be simply, well, it could be people briefing. It could be simply notice boards, things on, putting the reminders about the business continuity plan on notice boards in factories. It can be having information on sent out by email or on the company's intranet. And there can be more creative things that you can do as well, such as just having reminders that sort of pop up when people open their computers and things like that. It kind of depends on what you have in terms of channels for your business. I've got another question here. Somebody's asking a little bit about Crisis Optic. I was going to mention that actually. Crisis Optic here, there's the registration address. If anybody's interested in registering for it, it's optic.instinctive.com/registration, or you can email me and I can send you the link. It asks this whole series of questions about a company's crisis management. As I say, it's not focused on BC, but it does cover a little bit of BC, and it does have an engagement section. So it's all about benchmarking where a business is in terms of being ready to deal with a crisis, and that covers documentation, governance. It also covers sort of the whole cultural piece. It's based on a variety of international, national standards, as well as best practice that we have seen over numerous years of helping companies manage crises. So if anybody is interested in that, please do log on. So it is free, and you can find out more about it by coming to me. I think that's answered everybody's questions. If anybody does have any further questions, please do feel free to email me at julia.johnson@instinctive, that's instinctive with an F.com. And thank you very much for listening. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.